the west coast of the United States, 5 o'clock in some parts of Europe, 6 o'clock in other parts of Europe. I think I got it all covered. And tomorrow in Australia, and there are people listening in. Good morning. Welcome to Cool Stars. We have over 1,000 registrants. I'm completely overwhelmed, and I want to thank you all for coming. And I see a lot of you are online. I'm going to try to, in about 5 minutes here, explain how this is going to work. And everything's the same. If you have more questions, you can use the chat on the Zoom. You can put it into Slack, and we will try to answer your questions as the morning and afternoon and evening, wherever you happen to be, goes on. And now, whoop, there we go. There we are. Over 1,000 participants, about 500 in Europe, about 400 in the United States, about 223 who were able to disguise their location from our location finder. Welcome to everybody. We did this on a bit of a shoestring. We got together to start to talk about Cool Stars 21 and realized that we didn't think it was feasible for us to get together in the summer of 2021 in Toulouse. It just wasn't going to work. This was back in September, and I think that still was a good call. And so I was asked to organize a small little virtual conference just to sort of keep the continuity of Cool Stars going. And so welcome all 1,000 of you to our small little conference. This was a very lean sock. That's all you can say about it. I want to thank Andrea, Sacha, Jerome, Pascal, Javier, Miho, and Adriana. I apologize, I got Miho's name written backwards. And the lock is equally tiny. Moritz has been my partner in crime all through this, pulling back, dusting off, and sharpening up everything we did for Stars 20. Sean Gallagher is a name you're going to hear a lot. He's running this Zoom session, and James Davenport is a name you've already heard a lot. He is running the Gather Town. More on that in a moment. And Miho will be doing some tweeting for us, and everyone else feel free to tweet. I'll get to that in a moment. Conference schedule is going to be basically this time for the next 3 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, at least on the East Coast of the United States. Short breaks, a haiku, and then some topical interest rooms at the end of the day. Those topical interest rooms are meant to be a time to sit down and just talk about science. They'll be posted in the Slack, they'll be posted in the chat what the various topical interest rooms are. Whoops, I'm going to just jump ahead. The ones today have to do with accretion onto T-Tauri stars. They'll be led by Catherine SBI, solar and stellar cycles, and brown dwarf modeling. And then Wednesday and Thursday, there will be additional topical interest rooms. Posters are in several places. They're on the website. Our favorite button here is View Random Poster. There are 325 posters, and the one you hit is going to be interesting because, as far as I can tell, they're all pretty interesting. They are grouped. They link to the full PDFs, and then you can use the poster button in the Slack, and I'll mention that in a moment, to try to find the author if you want to talk to them. So Slack is our primary venue for communicating with people in the meeting. You can always put things in the chat. I and Moritz will be trolling the chat and trying to get answers to people. Slack is a lot more organized. There's a little icon here, hopefully you'll see. That's what's called the workspace. This is the Cool Stars 20.5 workspace. I have many other workspaces in the corner, but that's just this particular one. Then there are channels. That's the big one. So I've highlighted here the channel for this morning will be stellar systems and clusters, and I will be looking at that channel looking for questions. And you can also make comments, which I will not be repeating to the authors, but the author can come back and respond to your comments. Then there's this main body here, which is where you put in your comment or your question. Also, I'll go back to channels also include random, which is some interesting pictures and some other things. Please check out the other channels when you have a chance. Whoops. And finally, threads. When you do have an interesting discussion going on, you don't just back and forth in the bottom here. You hit reply, and that will put you in a thread. And then that conversation will be separated from all other conversations. So there's a lot of ways to communicate in Slack. Don't worry, you can't screw it up too badly. Just go ahead and play with it. We also have the Gather Town set up. We had about 70 people here for our reception yesterday. The space holds about 300, but it got pretty crowded yesterday. There are, last count, 5 poster rooms. About half of the 350 posters are available in Gather Town, and you can just walk past the poster like I've done here, and it'll bring up a little cheat sheet, and then you can click on the main of the poster and view the whole thing. You can also, if you bump into somebody, you can physically see them and talk to them as though it was a mini Zoom call. So that was actually a lot of fun yesterday. There's also some videos playing. There's a piano up in the corner, Tetris, all kinds of weird stuff. So go check that out. I recommend 11 to 12, like the hour before the meeting every day, and then also 4 to 6, the hour or so after the meeting every day. And this Zoom hall will exist for about a month, so feel free. We're publishing the same way we did last time using Zenodo. About 375 of you have already put posters into the Zenodo. When we get to May 1st, I will come. ADS will snarf this up and everything will go into ADS. You can put in posters, you can put in full articles, and you can put in the MP3s that are now the haiku. So that's where everything goes. Again, if you have more questions, all links going on are on the website, they're in the Zoom, and they're in the chat general. Finally, code of conduct. We still have one. Just because you're not seeing people in person doesn't mean you don't have to behave yourself. So please go ahead and interact, have fun, but this is a professional setting and please treat it that way. If there is a problem, you notice something, this Google form does still work. Finally, my friend and our colleague, John Stauffer, passed away very chair for Cool Stars 10. I ended up sitting on the lock there. He was the chair of Cool Stars 14. And somehow Chair roped me to chairing Cool Stars 20. I can't go into the breadth of his work. And we wanted to dedicate this meeting to him, but this isn't a memorial meeting. The talks had basically been scheduled by the time John passed, but we also couldn't let this go unnoted. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to invite Lee Hartman up to say a few words. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let John pick it up. Or sorry, let Lee pick it up.
Okay, I hope you can hear this.
Yep.
So it's my sad honor to say something about John. He was a longtime friend and collaborator, and of course, as Scott just said, well-known and well-liked, and collaborated with huge numbers of people at Cool Star meetings. Probably many of them are here virtually right now. He was I would say one of the leading stellar astronomers of his era, and he was a pioneer in the study of the angular momentum evolution and chromospheric activity of young cool stars. He also spent a lot of his career working on space missions. He was the leader of science teams for the submillimeter wave astronomy satellite, the IRAC GTO team, and his work as system scientist at Spitzer Science Center, as well as IPAC. for this meeting, I think one of the important things, he was really a major presence in all these meetings, pretty much ever since Cool Stars 2. As John mentioned, he was organizing committees, ran CS14, lots of other stuff I haven't kept track of. He was a prolific scientist. And one of the things about John was that he really loved working with lots of people. He organized all these large groups to do these major projects. And he had a lot of collaborators, and many of them he met at these meetings. And as a result, he's had really a major impact on the science and the careers of many, many researchers, including a lot of people participating here. So there's an obituary up on the AAS site and also at IPAC. I thought I'd spend just a couple minutes on some of his science. He did his thesis on the nuclei of disk galaxies, but his first and last and always love scientifically was the Pleiades and open clusters in general. He did a lot of important work in various areas. I found this as, I think, his first paper on the Pleiades, which there was an issue in those days as to whether low mass stars formed first and then the high mass stars formed later. And with improved photometry, showed they're probably coeval. He spent a lot of effort using the lithium criterion to get accurate age determinations of open clusters. And a lot of that work was done with his student David Viralo, who helped me with some of this review. So if you'll pardon me, I want to spend a little time on one of what I think was one of John's more important contributions, which was in the rotational evolution of low mass stars, solar type stars. So early on at CFA, John and I saw a result from Van Leeuwen that there were some remarkably short photometric variability of some K-stars in the Pleiades. And the obvious thing was that it was rotation, but we knew at the time, at least we thought we knew, that solar type stars are slow rotators. Certainly going back even to the Hyades, that's true. So we decided to go out to the multiple mirror telescope, which was relatively new at the time, and get rotational velocities. And we were freaked out actually to see what we found. There were these, on the left, you can see the Pleiades V Cygni, and it was, the G stars were slow rotator, but the K stars and later weren't. There were some extremely rapid objects. At the same time, there was a core of very slow rotators. So there was this very strange bimodal distribution. And then later on, John went and looked at the Alpha Persei, somewhat younger cluster, and there the G stars, there were some rapid rotators, but again, this bimodal distribution. So that was safe to say completely unexpected. So we tried to think about, well, where could this come from? The thought was that we had also started getting rotational velocities of T Tauri stars, and the thought was that some of this bimodality started at the pre-main sequence phase. And the idea was that there were some rapidly rotating stars that didn't have disks, but most of the stars that had disks were much slower rotators. And so the idea was, well, the stellar magnetosphere was locking the star to the disk and preventing it from rotating fast. And then at some point the disk goes away, you don't have any more locking. And then it was clear that in order to explain the rapid rotation of at least some of the stars, they had to spin up quite a bit, almost conserving angular momentum as they contracted to the main sequence. And then there was a rapid spin down. So completely weird behavior. So anyway, this bimodality could come from the T Tauri stars initial distribution, but it proved to be tricky or complicated to try and explain what was seen in the Pleiades in Alpha Per. Just taking the old Skumanich law, for those of you who know, just the spin down just didn't work at all to go from T-Tauri stars to main sequence. You had to fiddle around with various kinds of wind, angular momentum loss, various amounts of disk locking at different times. And I won't say too much more about that because, in fact, I don't think it's a lot of work has been done on this over the, since those early days. Different models of stellar winds. I think it's not entirely clear exactly how this all works and what the implications are yet for stellar wind angular momentum loss, and also, of course, for the evolution of magnetic activity, which we know is so dependent on rotation. In later years, John really led some very ambitious programs to explore the ability of Corot and Kepler to get remarkably accurate photometry over extended blocks of time, continuous blocks. So it was really remarkable for the variability of T-Tauri stars in 2264 and other regions. And these observations really previously undetected zoo of photometric changes, star spot rotation curves, variable accretion, bursts of accretion, and perhaps somewhat more intriguing, time-dependent occultation of the stars by dust somehow coming from the inner disk. So here I've highlighted a couple of papers. Here's a couple more papers. Even more rapidly rotating stars, structured light curves, orbiting clouds of material. So we don't really understand, I think, yet what's going on here. There's some idea that there's a turbulent ejection of dust from the inner disk that occasionally comes up and occults the stars. Is that just turbulence, or is it perturbation by companions running around, maybe planets? It's clear that there's a lot here that's just waiting to try and be interpreted, what that is not yet understood. So in this venue, I'm just going to skip over some personal reminiscences and close with some of John's own words. There's a very nice interview with Bill Ryperth in Star Formation Newsletter a couple of years ago. And in addition to talking about how his research developed and the history of it, he also talked a lot about cool stars, how he reported his first important results at cool stars 2 and 3 on rotation. And I think very significantly, how many friends and collaborators he met at those meetings, and many European collaborators. And also, of course, David Barral, who was his first student. And he mentions all the meetings that he helped organize, participated in. He was just an omnipresent at cool stars. So let me just quote a couple of sentences from that interview. He said, "I was able to present the first results from the open cluster rotation program at those meetings. Those talks were very well received because this was exactly the right venue. I quickly realized these people were my astronomical family." So, we've lost a kind and gentle family member, and it's a trite thing to say that he'll be missed professionally and personally, but sometimes that's about all you can say. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Lee. Yeah, there's a lot I wanted to, like I said, and I could see in your talk, could go on for an entire meeting, and maybe we will in the future. Well, not unfortunately, but this particular meeting, touches on a lot of things John worked on, and that is not accidental. And in fact, our first session is going to start with associations, which we were was referencing just a few minutes ago. Before we actually start with the formal part of the meeting, I'll just let people know, I know we're having trouble getting people on Slack. I'm trying to put everything in the chat. My power just came back at my house. I'll be able to do that in a few minutes. Two, let's see. So I will add a channel to the Slack if anyone wants to add reminiscences and pictures of John. That channel will be open throughout the meeting. But I want to get the formal part of the meeting going with our session on stellar associations. And our first speaker, Eleonora Zari,